Flo, short for Florence, was my wife. I'm Jim. We met in college and got married soon after graduation. We lived the normal life of husband and wife. We had children, a house, and a mortgage. Flo was a stay-at-home mom until her children went to school full-time, after which she returned to her real estate career. Flo was an attractive woman, and I personally still find her sexy. I'm sure she was occasionally hit on by someone at work, but as far as I know, she remained faithful to me and our marriage. She had a wicked sense of humor sometimes, and I think that's what ultimately got our marriage into trouble. We had two children, a boy Eric and a girl Patty. When this happened, Eric was 21. He graduated from a vocational school after high school. He had his own apartment nearby and worked as a trainee electrician. Patty was 19 and a sophomore at a state university about 150 miles away. Once the kids left, we had to look forward to a happy retirement, travel, and hopefully grandchildren to look forward to. Our sex life was, it seemed to me, normal. We had a loving relationship that we developed over the years of our marriage. When we first got married, we had sex almost every night and during the day on weekends. Over time, this began to happen 2 or 3 times a week, which was enough to satisfy my needs, and I thought it would be enough for Flo too. Over the years, I have learned all the buttons that need to be pressed. Every situation has a fly in the ointment, and ours came in the form of a new neighbor next door. Roger and his lovely wife Alice moved into a house nearby about 5 years ago, and we all quickly became best friends. The problem with Roger was that he was a down-to-earth prankster and loved to prank everyone he came in contact with, and to my regret, I was one of his favorite targets for pranks. Moreover, I was even more disturbed by Flo's enjoyment of these jokes, especially when the jokes were on my side. I often told her that I didn't like his jokes or her enjoyment of them, but she didn't listen or back down until it almost led to divorce. I could take the joke, but Roger's jokes began to hurt my pride. Over time, I noticed that Roger was attracted to Flo, and it bothered me that he was trying to win her over. When we were together, he and Flo would laugh at his sometimes dirty jokes, while Alice and I would just smile politely at their antics. Alice and I got along well, and in fact, sometimes it felt like we were with the wrong partners. When we were in public, I knew that Alice was just as embarrassed as I was by some of their antics. I remember one day on the beach, Roger showed his ass to people on a passing boat, and to my horror, Flo followed suit. Alice and I were shocked by their indecent behavior and reproached them, but to no avail as they laughed out loud together. After a while, until the end, I started to feel like things were getting out of control. We were at Roger and Alice's house, and Alice sat with me in the backyard, while Flo followed Roger into the house to help carry drinks. Alice and I talked for a long time until we realized that Flo and Roger had been gone too long. In fact, it took too long, so we went inside to look for them. When we walked into the kitchen, it was empty, but as soon as we started looking for them, they came out of the family room hugging and laughing. They stopped when they saw us. Roger had lipstick marks on his collar and around his mouth, while Flo's lipstick was smeared and her hair was disheveled. Alice and I stood there in shock, our mouths open. Roger was always quick to find an answer to any situation and said, as if it was no big deal, "Oh, hi guys. Sorry about the delay with the drinks, but I had to show Flo my prints," apparently oblivious to his appearance. Alice and I continued to stand there, still stunned by their sheer audacity. Flo had a grin on her face and was just as quick to chime in, saying, "Roger has some really wonderful prints. You know the kind I'm talking about, don't you, Alice?" By this time, I had come to my senses and finally spoke. "What the hell is going on here?" I asked Flo. "How is it that Roger has lipstick on his face and clothes, and your hair is tousled? Did you two kiss?" "Oh, that's because I was so excited to see Roger's prints. I must have gotten carried away. Do you mind, dear?" she asked, trying to keep a straight face. I was outraged by this, but I think I began to understand by looking at their faces. Roger had the grin he usually shows when he comes up with one of his jokes, and Flo turned away so I couldn't see her face, but I could imagine how hard she was trying to hold back her laughter. I felt my irritation growing. Alice had not yet caught up with what was happening when she finally spoke. "What the hell is going on, Roger? If you think you can have an affair with another woman in my house, you better think again." When Roger and Flo suddenly started laughing loudly, I think Alice finally realized what was going on, and she smiled shyly. However, I exploded at them. "One day you cross the border, and then the real trouble begins. Come on, honey, it's just a joke. If you saw the looks on your faces, you'd think it was funny too," Flo told me, still laughing. In retrospect, I should have told them then and there what I thought of their hurtful jokes and gone straight home, with or without Flo. "Come on, guys, I'll get you some drinks and we can all laugh together," Roger said as he led us back outside with Flo behind him, still laughing. Alice and I just shrugged and followed them, shaking our heads in disbelief. We didn't think it was funny at all, and we certainly weren't going to laugh. "One day, Alice, they will go too far," I predicted once more. "One of these times, their joke will backfire on them, and someone could get seriously hurt." Alice agreed with me. Their prank ruined the evening for both of us, and the night ended earlier than usual. As we walked home, I didn't hold Flo's hand like I always did, and she sensed my continued irritation. It was a very painful joke, and my pride was hurt. "Honey, I'm sorry," she told me. "Sometimes I get too carried away." Nothing happened. I just smeared a little lipstick on his face and collar and ruffled his hair a little. "We thought you would never come into the house, and in the end, just as we were about to give it all up, you and Alice finally showed up. Are you still mad at me? It was just a joke." "I'm trying not to get angry, Flo, but you need to stop playing Roger's pranks. I almost died of fear when I saw you like that. I really thought you were kissing him. You know how important it is to me that we were completely faithful to each other. Our marriage vows mean so much to me." "I know, darling. I feel the same way and would never do anything to hurt you." "Well, please remember that. Okay, give me a big kiss and tell me you forgive me." We stopped and kissed for a moment and continued walking home. I realized that I had not told her that I forgive, but I said nothing, not knowing if she realized the potential damage she could cause to our marriage. When we got back to our house, I think Flo realized that I was still really angry, especially about her volunteering for the prank, and she went to take a shower to give me more time to cool down. I thought it was strange that she wanted to take another shower since we had both showered before we went to the neighbor's house, but I didn't think much of it. She must have been in the shower for a long time since I was already asleep. A couple of weeks later, we were invited back to Roger and Alice's for a Saturday night barbecue. But just as we had finished eating, after Roger had gone into the kitchen for another bottle of wine, the call came. Only later did I find out that he called the home phone from his cell phone and pretended to answer the phone for Alice. Alice worked as a nurse at a local hospital in the emergency department. After he hung up, he returned to the cafeteria and told Alice it was an emergency. There was a serious car accident and a lot of people were hurt. They want you to come right away. "Oh shit, I'll get changed and go. Sorry guys, I have to go. I'll be back as soon as possible." 10 minutes later, Alice was already in uniform and heading to the hospital. After she left, Roger approached me about helping him with a project in his basement while I was here. Flo was silent at this time and looked away. I didn't think anything special at the time, but later I remembered it. "Of course. How can I help you?" I asked, standing up to follow him to the basement. "I need you to hold this up while I attach it to the ceiling. It's not very heavy, but I can't hold it and secure it at the same time, and Alice is too short to help." "Okay, that sounds easy." "Trust me, it really is, and it will only take a minute." As we descended into the basement, he led me to a metal support post that held up the floor above, mounted next to the furnace. He took a small metal box with an electrical cord hanging from it from his workbench and raised it to the ceiling between the support pipe and the furnace. I noticed that Flo had followed us into the basement and was standing watching us with a smile on her face. Again, I didn't pay much attention to her presence or her strange smile. For what? Now, I want you to hold this here while I attach it, Roger said. What is this anyway, Roger? I asked, raising my hands to hold the box. Since Roger was standing between the pipe and the furnace, I had to wrap my hands around the pipe to press it against the basement ceiling. I'll show you in a minute, but first let me grab my tools. He disappeared behind me to his workbench, leaving me holding the box. A second or two later, he returned, and I didn't see what he had in his hands until I heard two quick snaps as something hard and metal grabbed my wrists. Suddenly, I realized that I was caught and was handcuffed to the pipe. I turned around in shock to see Roger walk up to Flo and put his arm around her waist as they stood looking at me. My mind was a mess, but I was able to speak. What the hell is this, Roger? Take off those damn handcuffs now. Roger, what the hell are you up to? Free me now. Well, buddy, you know I can't do that. You remember, don't you, that 2 weeks ago Flo said she liked my prints so much that she wanted to see them again. But this time we don't want to, for you or Alice to get in our way, he said, squeezing Flo, and she squealed. He and Flo then turned and headed back down the stairs to the basement. Flo wriggled her hips in an exaggerated manner as she moved. Let me go, damn it. You've gone too far this time, Roger, and you'll regret it if you don't let me go right now. Just calm down for a little while, honey. I just want to see some prints, Flo said as they approached the door. I shouted to Flo as she walked through the door. Flo, please don't do this. Flo, please. Flo, don't. I knew she heard me because she turned around for a moment, but then disappeared from sight, laughing and giggling. As I struggled with the handcuffs, trying to find a way to free myself, I realized the hopelessness of my situation. The pipe was embedded in the concrete floor below and secured to a steel beam above. Perhaps I could break the chain on the handcuffs. As I listened, I heard them move into the master bedroom directly above me. Then I remembered that the previous owners had made some changes to the heating system, and for some reason every sound in the room could be heard in the basement. It became clear to me later that Roger must have known this and told Flo. I should have heard everything, and I heard them having sex. Oh, that was really good, Roger. I'll have to look at your prints again. I guess we should get dressed and go down to see how Jim was doing. It was so exciting for me, knowing that he saw us leave together. She must have known then that I heard everything. Okay, Flo, I need to rest for a minute. But Alice should be back soon from that fake call I gave her, and I don't want her to catch me in bed with you. Remember, she was angry when she thought we just kissed a few weeks ago. I was absolutely devastated by what I heard. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps on the basement stairs, but I didn't look up when they came towards me. Oh shit, I heard Roger. Look at his wrists. Hell, look at his clothes and his floor. Oh my God, honey, it was just a joke. Nothing happened. Oh God, no, I'm so sorry. Hurry, Roger, open the handcuffs. Oh God, oh no, I never thought he would be so upset. Not like that. Why did we do this? I could barely feel the pain in my wrists, as the pain in my chest was much worse from what they had just done. I looked up at them with tears streaming down my face as Roger clumsily tried to open the handcuffs, his hands shaking. Roger, you better give the key to Flo before you free me, and then start running. Once I'm free, I'll make you regret the day you were born. I'll kill you for sleeping with my wife and ruining my marriage. Roger looked into my eyes and saw the deep and utter hatred in my eyes and silently handed the key to Flo. He started to say, "We didn't, it was just." But he stopped and quickly walked towards the basement stairs with a scared look at me as Flo started to open the handcuffs. When she finally released them, I heard Roger's truck start up and the tires screech as he drove away. Standing up, I looked at Flo, still kneeling on the floor, with a scared look on her face and tears in her eyes. I was hurt more than ever, and I wanted her to feel some of my pain. I wanted her to understand how much she had hurt me, but the only words that came out of my mouth were, "You're a fucking soulless bitch. You better find somewhere else to sleep tonight, preferably forever. I never want to see you again. Go and live with your sister or something." I couldn't stop. That wasn't what I really wanted to say. Tears streamed down her face as she began to realize the enormity of the pain she had caused and what I had just said about our future or lack thereof. I had never swore or raised my voice at her before. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. It was just a joke. We didn't do anything. I love you so much. It was nothing." "You're a lying bitch. I know what I heard, and I never want to hear that bullshit about it being a joke again. As far as I know, you slept with him, and that's all that matters. You committed adultery and intentionally abused me. I'm scared to think how long you've been planning to humiliate me like this, or even how many times you've slept with him before, maybe even 2 weeks ago. I hate you for helping him organize this. You slept with him, but how could you do that, knowing that I could hear while I was handcuffed right below you? You can expect a call from my lawyers in the next few days. We're both done together until we're exhausted. I am concerned." I screamed as I turned and walked up the stairs. "No, Jim, please, nothing happened. Nothing happened, Jim. Please stop. We didn't do anything, Jim. We were only pretending. Please stop. Jim, please," she screamed. "Jim, I love you. Please stop." Now it was her turn to beg. I was so angry, so hurt, and I didn't believe her after what I heard. I didn't answer when I went outside. Just as I was approaching the curb, a very angry Alice pulled into the driveway. "Where is that moron husband? There was no accident, and I wasn't needed in the emergency room," she shouted as she got out of the car. Suddenly, she noticed my wrists. "Jim, what's wrong with you? Oh God, look at your wrists. Let me bandage them for you." "Roger and Flo, there's Alice in there. They've gone too far this time, and I'm divorcing Flo." "Oh my God, Jim, what did they do to you? Jim, wait, let me help you, please." "You can hear it from Flo and Roger. I can't stay in your house anymore, and I'll never set foot there again after what they did to me. Alice, they insulted me. I'm going home and bandaging my own wounds. You can tell my ex-wife that she'll find her stuff on the porch tomorrow. If she wants to get back into our house, she'll have a restraining order to make sure she stays away from me completely." "Oh my God, what's going on here? What did they do?" Shocked and upset, Alice screamed as she hurried into the house, trying to avoid the blood. Still seething with internal indignation, I headed home. I suffered greatly, but my resentment at the way they treated me and the complete disregard they showed me burned me inside. I had some ideas about what I needed to do. I wanted serious revenge. I wanted them to suffer, and I wanted a divorce because she insulted me. When I got home, I took out my digital camera and, using a timer, carefully took pictures of my wrists, making sure that the wounds looked quite serious. I locked the doors from the inside barricaded door and exited through the garage, knowing that Flo did not have the remote control to open the door. In case I decided to divorce her, I wanted to have an official medical record of my injuries while trying to free myself, so I headed to the hospital to have my wounds bandaged. I recognized the nurse at the reception from the church. At the same moment, she recognized me, and I approached her, staggering in the last meters. "I'll have a lot to clean up when I get home, or perhaps I should leave it for Flo if I take her back. It seems fair." She looked at my hands, then screamed for help. As she helped me into the wheelchair, she asked what happened. I looked at her sadly and told her she should ask Flo. I knew that the entire parish community at the church would know that I was in the hospital because of something Flo did by the end of tomorrow's Mass. Everyone will ask Flo what happened when they see her. I knew that Flo never missed Sunday Mass. I hoped that she would somehow get there tomorrow. It was only a short walk. I got a weird look when I told her not to call Flo to let her know I was here. She saw the seriousness in my gaze and agreed with surprise. A couple of nurses helped me wash up and change into hospital pajamas since my arms were practically useless due to the thick bandages, and in the morning they were bandaged again so I could drive home. Peeing with someone else's help was a new experience. I rested, reflecting on the night's events and wondering if I had overdone it, if it really was a dirty joke. But I knew what I had heard. It sounded so real to me. I was still angry at them when the policeman entered my room. He introduced himself as Sergeant James Bell, and said that the hospital had called him regarding my injuries, and he was there to look into it. I told him I wasn't sure if a crime had been committed, but he asked me to tell my story. He sat and listened, taking notes in his notebook. I was sure he was probably secretly recording it. When I finished, he told me that on the face of it, if I wanted, charges could be filed for using handcuffs. I told him I wasn't sure, and he seemed agreeable, but then asked if I minded if he contacted me soon to find out my decision. It turned out better than I could have expected. I had a sleepless night. When I was awake, I kept thinking about how they insulted me and what I heard. How could my best friend and my life partner do this to me? It was just as bad when I was sleeping because I had nightmares. I woke up at dawn and told the nurses that if they didn't let me go, I would leave anyway, and by the time they bandaged my wounds, it was the end of the night shift when I left. I saw Alice arriving at work, and it was obvious she hadn't slept either as she looked exhausted. Alice clearly didn't expect to see me, and by the time she recognized me, it was too late and I walked past her. Her jaw dropped when she saw the extensive bandages on my wrists. I had a few seconds while she realized the extent of my injuries, so I hid behind the ambulance and was out of sight before she could catch up to me. I saw her make 3 phone calls before looking back again and going inside for her shift. One can only guess who she called. I was sure that one of the calls was mine, but my phone was turned off. I couldn't have planned my exit better if I wanted to. When I got home, I was still angry and started packing Flo's things into plastic trash bags and putting them on the porch. The home phone kept ringing, but I refused to answer or even check the caller ID. I remembered that I turned off my cell phone last night and turned it on again. I had over 50 messages pending. Some messages informed me of missed calls, but most were left by Flo, Alice, and Roger, mostly Flo. I still loved Flo so much Flo and wanted to hear her voice again, so I played one of her messages. She cried and said that she loved me very much and that nothing had happened. She was willing to do whatever it took to get me to forgive her. She added that she was scared to go home and that she was worried about me. Then I listened to the most recent messages she left after Alice probably called her. Flo sounded hysterical, asking how I was doing and saying that Alice had seen me leaving the hospital with my wrists heavily bandaged. I deleted them all. I still loved her so much, and it hurt, and I tried so hard to believe her. I wanted to trust her, but what I heard seemed so real. It was still very painful, and I was in so much pain. The next thing I did was go and find the number of a locksmith who could change the locks on the house. I realized that if I left for work or the lawyers on Monday and Flo came back to the house and changed the locks, I would be left out in the cold, so I made arrangements for him to change the locks as soon as possible. I knew it would cost more on Sunday, but I didn't care. My demons were thinking for me again. It took me a good part of the morning to pack all of Flo's things into bags, and I didn't stop until the locksmith came and changed my locks. From time to time I glanced at my neighbor's house and was sure that I saw someone watching at the window. I found myself still angry after the locksmith had left, and I was putting Flo's last bag down next to the porch when a police car pulled up to the curb. Yesterday's sergeant got out of the car and came up to me. While we were talking, I noticed Roger coming home and watching from his driveway. At first I pretended not to see him, but I noticed his jaw drop when he realized that I was now talking to the police and pointing to his house. I then pointed at Roger as we both looked at him. The look on his face was priceless. I asked the sergeant to follow me and offered him coffee while we discussed whether I wanted to file a complaint. We talked at length about the incident that happened the night before and about my love for my wife while we drank coffee. He told me that he let his wife go after an incident that happened some time ago and how much he missed her. I really felt for him when he told me about his loss and his endless loneliness. He saw her from time to time and tried to repair their relationship. He asked what I was going to do now, and I told him how much I was hurt by being cuckolded in reality or in my mind. I told him about my love for my life partner, the woman I never wanted to lose. Then I told him about my pain. He looked at me, then smiled and asked if I wanted revenge if it really was a joke. He went on to say that he would be happy to visit them and get their testimony, of course, unofficially, unless I filed a complaint, leading them to believe that it could be a serious prison sentence since they illegally detained me. I thought it was good, so I agreed, and we laughed for the first time. I confirmed Roger and Alice's address when he wrote it down, and gave him Mary's address in case Flo had already gone there. He told me that he would even record their responses and discomfort during the interview, as well as their realization that they had gone too far and might end up in prison. I downloaded photos of my wrists and gave him copies to add weight to his investigation. After seeing the good sergeant out, I noticed that Roger's truck had disappeared again, and as soon as I closed the door, the phone rang again. I noticed that the caller ID said it was Alice's cell phone, so I picked up the phone and said hello to her, suspecting it had something to do with the policeman at my house and Roger seeing him talking to me. It was Alice, and her voice sounded worried. She started telling me that Roger was with her at work, and he turned white as a ghost when he saw me with the police. I thought he would have rushed there when he realized he was gone. She asked why I didn't stop and talk to her sooner when she saw me, and then told me that she called Flo after she saw me leaving the hospital heavily bandaged. She said Flo wouldn't talk to Roger anymore and things were very difficult all night. They wanted to come over last night after Flo told her what they did and talk about it, but they saw my lights were out and thought I was sleeping. Alice continued and told me that Flo had since called her and told her that everyone she talked to at church told her that I had been admitted to the hospital overnight, and she was furious. When Alice saw me leaving the hospital, they just assumed I had gone there to get a tetanus shot. She added that Flo had gone to church and was hoping to meet me and ask our priest to help solve our problem. But I wasn't there for the first time in years, and everyone was asking her awkward questions. She felt so alone and so humiliated, not knowing anything and finding out where I spent the night. She was worried about what kind of wife they all thought she was as they wondered what she had done. Even our priest knew about my stay in the hospital and tried to call me without success. Flo thought I had just gone home and gone to bed after bandaging myself wounds. If it was just a joke, I wanted Alice to know what was going on because she had no part in it, but I couldn't be sure she wouldn't say something, and I still wanted her to Roger, and Flo felt some feelings. Pain too. I told Alice I didn't call the police. They had received a call from the hospital due to the nature of my injuries, and were now inquiring about Roger and Flo for my unlawful detention, and should expect the police to obtain statements from the three of them. I then explained that the police would then decide whether charges would be filed. There was silence for a minute, but I heard her whispering to Roger what I had just told her. I heard him scream, then Alice spoke again and asked if I could stop the police pursuit. I told her that I had not filed any complaints yet, but the police had my statement and the hospital report, and that might be enough for them to proceed. I didn't want to hurt Alice, and I was afraid she might become collateral damage if I wasn't careful. Then I realized that I would have to tell her, and I asked her to come see me either tonight on the way home or tomorrow after I returned from the lawyers to make sure that the idiot was not with her. She asked if I was serious about meeting with the lawyers, and I told her that I was. She then asked how I was feeling and if I needed anything, and I thanked her and said that changing the bandages was not easy and I was in a lot of pain, but what they did made me feel even more pain. I knew she would pass it on to Flo and Roger, and it would make things worse for them. Alice went on to tell me that she trusted them and thought it was just another joke that had gone too far. She asked about my plans and begged me to at least talk to Flo before she had a breakdown. I told her that I wasn't willing to get close enough to talk to either Flo or Roger, and if either of them approached me, I would leave town and be out of their lives forever. My demons were ruling my life and making me forget how much I loved my wife. All I wanted to do was hurt the people who hurt me. Alice didn't call that night. After the call, I got in the car and headed to the local supermarket, where I bought a set of frozen dinners to have with me for a week or so, and then returned to my lonely house. I missed Flo dearly after almost 24 years together, but I couldn't get over my anger at her and what she and Roger had done to me. When I was done for the day, I locked myself in, undressed, and lay down on the bed. Even though I was emotionally and physically tired, it took me a long time to fall asleep. When I woke up in the morning, the phone rang again, but I refused to acknowledge it. I got up, showered, and ate breakfast, then changed the bandages on my wrists as best I could, then called my boss and told him I had hurt my wrists and needed a week off. After he finally agreed, I left to talk to my lawyers and start getting even more revenge. I knew that within a few hours of my visit there, Flo would have found out that I was there, since a close friend of her sister's worked there as a secretary, so I was forced to do what I did. Around 3 o'clock the doorbell rang, and I looked out to see Alice standing at the door in a nurse's uniform with a bag of bandages in her hand, and opening the door I invited her in. "Well, they really did it this time, didn't they?" she said as she entered. "I'm afraid so." "What are you going to do? Are you still doing what you said?" she asked, leading me to the kitchen table and removing my bandages. I knew deep down that my anger was still speaking for me. My mind told me that I loved Flo, but my demons were still in control. "Just like I told her, I'm divorcing her," I replied, wincing in pain when she accidentally brushed against my stitches. "But they say nothing happened. It was just one of their jokes, albeit a very tasteless one." "Flo desperately wants to talk to you," she replied as she began bandaging my wounds. Her touch was so gentle. "Alice, I've heard them do it, and as far as I'm concerned, it's real. I've already talked to my lawyers, and they agree. I came earlier today, and they are preparing the documents," I calmly told her. "You're still very angry, aren't you? Can't you wait until you cool down before you do something so drastic? You have invested almost 24 years in each other. Do you want to give it up without trying anything else? Try to save something." "I will not be a cuckold. I've said this to Flo many times, and she did it to me in the worst possible way, and now it could all be over." I did not tell her that my lawyer had been ordered not to serve her, but to await further instructions. But they claim nothing happened. They were just making noise like it really happened. "I can't be sure that didn't happen, Alice. They expect us to take their word for it, just like any lover would. Everything was prepared for this to happen, and they have no way of proving that it did not happen. So I have to agree with my opinion that it is so. Either way, she had absolutely no respect for me or our marriage vows, Alice. Can't you leave everything as it is and go to a psychologist?" "Flo is really confused about this," she asked as she finished applying the bandages. "No, it wasn't me who did the wrong thing. I warned her last time about such things, but she didn't listen. I even wonder if they slept that night when they played their joke on us. They've been gone too long. I'm done talking. Maybe we'll just let the lawyers sort it out. If you're happy with Roger's involvement in this, then you can continue living with him. Just tell shit I better make sure he stays away from me in the future. I haven't quite decided what to do with Roger yet, Jim, but I really don't want to see you guys break up over this. Roger is very remorseful about all this and wants me to forgive him. Are we really concerned about the police getting involved? We're all more worried than you think. Alice, he can shove his apology up his ass. As far as I understand, it costs nothing. Not after what he did to me. Alice, I was supposed to be his friend. Be sure to tell him that too. Please make sure he understands that our friendship is over. It's over. Either way, he's been deliberately hurting me with Flo's support for ages now. As much as I would like to remain friends with you, I think it would be best to limit our contact until we get through this, one way or another. I didn't realize what his jokes did to you, Jim. Is there anything I can tell Flo that might give her some hope that you will forgive her?" Of course I knew I still loved Flo and wanted her back so I could say what I mean. "You're kidding, aren't you? Forgive her for what she did. Maybe if she can prove to me that she didn't have sex with Roger, I'll think about it and definitely won't take Roger or her word that nothing happened and it was just a tasteless joke. As far as I understand, this actually happened. If I had any inkling that it was just a joke and they weren't actually asleep, I certainly wouldn't have done that to my wrists." "Did you really believe that they were having sex then?" "Alice, I told you, I heard everything. Honestly, I believe they had sex as much as I believe you are sitting in front of me right now. Jim, I'm so sorry they did this to you. I'll tell her, and you know I'll miss you and our long conversations. I'll miss you too, Alice. Now let me load her things into your car, and you can take them to her. Maybe I should have just thrown her things over the fence, but I didn't know if you still had her. Or she has already moved in with her sisters. She's moving in with her sister this afternoon after I pick up her gear. You'll be glad to know that Roger was too scared to come home last night, in case you were waiting for him with a baseball bat or something. Jim, I stayed the whole night and was by her side in case she did something stupid and hurt herself, as she was very upset. She cried all night and looked out the window at your house. We thought you were at home in bed and did not know that you were in the hospital. I didn't tell you, but sometime after midnight, when I realized Flo wasn't going to go to bed, we finally arrived and tried to go in to make sure you were okay, but all the doors were locked. I wondered, why didn't you hear her crying? I'm sure all the neighbors heard her. We should have been with you in the hospital. Alice, I got angry, and they completely destroyed my pride and self-esteem. I wanted to be alone and away from her. Alice, I still can't even understand how they could do this to me, even if it was just a bad joke, I replied. Well, let me tell you, Flo is completely devastated by what she did to you. As we loaded Flo's bags into Alice's car, I told her that I would try to stop the police from charging them if she didn't tell Roger or Flop that I was stopping them. I told her I wanted them to think the investigation was ongoing. She looked at me for a moment, then said they were hurting enough, but promised not to say anything. Her husband had lost his best friend, and Flo looked like she had lost me. She said I needed to be careful not to end up as bad as them. I waved to her as she left my driveway, then turned into mine, then walked back into the house and thought seriously about what she said. It was true, and now I needed to make sure it wasn't true. I was sure I saw Flo standing at the window, watching me. That evening, around 7:30, I was watching TV when the doorbell rang. Looking out the window, I saw Flo's sister, Mary, standing at the front door. Her sister lived on the other side of town. Mary was a widow and lived alone, so Flo had room, perhaps indefinitely if needed. If Flo didn't have a safe place, no matter how angry I was, I knew I would have let her stay in our house and left. "Hello, Mary," was my greeting as I opened the door to let her in. "Hi, Jim. Can I borrow a few minutes of your time?" "Of course, Mary. I have no argument with you. Come in." We walked into the living room, she sat down, and I sat in the chair opposite her and asked if she wanted something to drink. Coke would be nice. I took it for her and myself and returned to the living room. "I guess you know what we're talking about," she said, taking a sip of her drink. "Certainly. Are you going to ask me to take her back? If so, then you made the trip in vain and you can leave. My angry demons are back." "Well, then I won't ask about it, will I?" "Jim, she told me all about what they did. How are your wrists?" "They are a little itchy now, and I hope everything will be okay. I don't see any signs of infection, and everything is going well. The stitches will be removed at the end of the week, as I was told. Flo will be glad to hear they are getting better. You know, she's almost ready for a nervous breakdown, especially since you don't want to talk to her and won't let her come home. That's why I'm here, to convey her words. I will listen to your messages, but I promise nothing in return. First of all, she loves you very much and is very sorry for what she did. Okay, I heard all this in the messages on my phone before I deleted them. Anything else? I answered coldly. Mary looked a little upset when I said this, but replied, "She wants you to know that she is willing to do anything, absolutely anything, Jim, to prove to you that nothing happened between her and Roger. Jim, she's desperate. She's in pain, and she loves you so much that I'm starting to worry about her health." Mary, ask her if she loved me so much when she did this to me. Why did she want to hurt me so much? Mary, ask her why she didn't stop all this when I begged her not to go with him. Mary, she just turned to look at me and smile and then walked away with him holding each other. How can she prove that nothing happened? It was real. I could hear them as if they were next to me. Tell me, how can she say that I didn't hear what I heard, Mary? I thought about it for hours. I even thought that she could do it, take the test, but now it's too late. Maybe if I had thought about it when it happened, I might have believed her. Oh, Jim, I'm so sorry to hear that she did this to you. I didn't know this happened. You honestly believe she slept with him, don't you? Mary, I told you. I know what I heard. I desperately want her to prove to me that she didn't do it, but now it's too late and maybe too late for us. And how can I forgive her for setting me up like that, then cuckolding me, Mary? I loved her so much and always planned to spend the rest of my life with her, but after what she did to me, I don't know, it doesn't look all that encouraging. They did this knowing that I could hear everything and handcuffed me to the pipe so that I could not stop them from doing it. She deliberately cuckolded me. Jim, can't you just trust her and forgive her stupidity for making such an offensive joke? I'm sorry, Mary. It definitely wasn't a joke to me. I can't believe or trust her until she proves that she and Roger didn't have sex. But it will take a long time to trust her again. I'm so sorry, Jim. I don't know how they can prove it now. Can I get back to you if I can think of anything, please? And Jim, she heard from a friend of mine that you were seeing a lawyer about divorcing her. She has been hysterical ever since. I'm only here because she cried herself to sleep. You will completely destroy her and yourself if you do this. You were made for each other. Please wait. Please give me a few days before you serve her. Okay, Mary, I'll wait until I hear from you. Is that all you wanted to say? And don't forget to ask her these questions. Thanks for meeting me, Jim. I promise I'll get back to you this week. Bye. And she left. Sergeant Bell came the next day as promised, after collecting 3 incident reports. He recorded the visits as promised. At first, I thought I would be pleased to hear them suffer, but strangely enough, I kept hearing Alice's words of warning in my head. I listened to Roger's trembling voice and the way he almost cried. Flo was hysterical, and it was only through the intervention of Mary, who gave her a very strong sedative that she had been keeping since her husband's tragic and sudden death, that she eventually calmed down and gave her testimony. Alice kept her word and didn't say anything to either of them. I didn't like what I just did to 3 people I loved, and I think Sergeant Bell knew how I felt. I read their statements, and he told me they supported mine, except they didn't have sex in the room above my head. I thanked him for his efforts, and he made me promise to think about how lonely life can be without the one you love. I should have been happy about what I had done with them, but I realized that I was starting to feel the opposite. I knew that soon after that I would hear something from Alice again, and I was not mistaken. I was in the yard when Alice came home from work, parked in the driveway, and walked up to me. She was crying, her makeup looked sloppy, and when she came up, I walked over to her and gave her my handkerchief to soothe her tears. I took her hand, led her to the patio, and sat her down, while I went to get some cold drinks. When I returned, she turned to me and said, "Jim, the policeman came and took our statements. He had already seen Flo and took her." Then I called Mary, and she told me that Flo was so scared when the police showed up at her door. They never thought that the situation could get out of control. I know you hate Roger now for what he did, but he was scared shitless by the police visit. He's never even had a parking ticket, and now he's here. It's a mess. The cop took a photo of where you were handcuffed and forced Roger to show him how you were held captive. He packed the handcuffs and showed us pictures of your wrists. I didn't think you would react this way, and I never expected this outcome, Jim. It stopped being funny to them when they saw your wrists that night. Mary, it should have stopped being funny when she heard me begging her not to go with him. They both heard my plea, but continued walking. I'm sorry, Jim. Poor Roger was shaking all the time, and I doubt he'll ever make another joke, especially after they told him that if he were to be charged, he would need a good lawyer, because if he was found guilty, it could lead to imprisonment. You can still stop any accusations, right, Jim? Please, prison will destroy Roger. I interrupted her and said coldly, like he ruined me, Alice, ruined my marriage, and ruined my life. Alice looked shocked and then continued, Jim, please don't do this to us, to me. Alice burst into tears again and continued, Jim, please, I have no one else, no family, no one. Roger is all I have. And you and Flo were my closest friends. You were like family to me. Jim, I'd be willing to do whatever it takes. Jim, please make love to me if it makes you feel better about what happened. I walked over to her and hugged her as she continued to cry. Now I knew that my good friend was already collateral damage. Poor Alice must have been desperate, and I certainly didn't expect her to offer herself to me to even the score. And although she was a very hot woman, I only loved my wife. My retribution has gone too far. It would be too critical of me to sleep with Alice after everything I said about fidelity. I thanked her and told her I wouldn't press charges as long as she continued to not tell them anything. Then she leaned over and hugged me, starting to cry again for what seemed like an eternity. Eventually, Alice stopped crying, looked at me, and asked, "What about Flo? Have you talked to her yet?" "Jim, please forgive her. Mary told me that she doesn't eat and has lost weight. She just sits there, staring into space and crying all the time." All I could say was, "Alice, I want to forgive her. I want to love her again, but I still can't. I want her back, but I still need proof that they didn't do it. Any proof will help." "Oh, Jim, what have I done? I just realized I was so angry at them and what they did or didn't do on our bed that I took the sheets off the bed and washed them. I couldn't bear the thought of lying on top of her. Honestly, Jim, I didn't see any evidence that they were sleeping, but I did see that they were on the bed, and that fits with their stories. Oh, if only we checked them. Now I don't know how you're going to get proof. You know, I seriously wanted to settle the score and be with you to help you forgive them." And then she kissed me on the cheek and went home. 2 nights later, I was turning off the lights and preparing to return to my lonely, empty bed when I heard Mary's car screeching into the driveway. It wasn't too late, but whatever she wanted must have been important, and I prayed that Flo would be okay and opened the door for her. Mary jumped out of the car and rushed towards my door. I was worried and was about to ask her if Flo was okay when she started talking a million miles an hour. I pulled her in, trying to calm her down, and sat her down. For kitchen table, I handed her a bottle of Coke to try to slow her down. Her eyes were excited, and she took a deep breath, which began again. "Jim, we were just watching NCIS on TV. Jim, they used a lie detector. Jim, a lie detector may give you the answers you need so you can get your flow back. What do you think? Please, Jim, you have to do this. You owe it to yourself. Please, Jim, please." I sat there and thought about what she was saying, and maybe that was the only proof I could get, and I just nodded my head. She wants you to know that she is willing to take a lie detector test to prove that she is not lying when she says nothing happened to Roger, never happened to him or anyone else. This is the only proof she can offer you. This was a new direction I hadn't thought of, and I thought about it for a few more minutes while Mary watched me intently, still sipping her Coca-Cola. It sounds normal to me, but I want to put some conditions on it. First of all, results that prove she didn't have sex with Roger don't mean I'll take her back. Secondly, Roger will have to take the same test, and his test results will have to match hers. Third, I need the approval of the person administering the tests and questions, and fourth, I will not pay for the tests. That sounds reasonable to me, Jim, but could you be more confident about bringing her back if the test results show they're not lying? No, she cuckolded me and hurt me deeply, and even if I take her back, it will be a long time before I'll forgive you. Okay, Jim, I'll give her your terms. I'm really sorry about all this mess. I wanted to criticize her for her stupidity when she showed up at my house, but she was such a pathetic sight that I don't believe anything I could say would make her feel any worse. She knows that she did a very stupid thing and also caused you terrible harm, especially after I told her what you said during my last visit. I also want to tell you that she called your children and told them what she did. I think they were a little upset that she hadn't stopped crying since she talked to them. Well, I better go back and deliver your message. Thanks for the Coca-Cola. Okay, Mary. Thanks for coming all the way here. I appreciate your concern. After she left, I sat down to think about the situation. Some of my initial anger had cooled, and I could now think more clearly about what I wanted. I decided to drink first and went into the office where my liquor cabinet was, filled a glass halfway with good whiskey, and then went to the kitchen to add an ice cube. Without returning to my place, I wandered around the house, looking at everything that was a memory of our family life together. Did I really want to end my marriage, remembering what Sergeant Bell had told me about his loneliness? I was awakened from my thoughts and memories by the doorbell. Looking out the window, I saw our daughter Patty standing at the front door, looking clearly unhappy. Holy shit, I thought. She just discovered that the locks had been changed and her key didn't work. I opened the door and Patty immediately walked inside, giving me a dirty look. "What's up with changing the locks, Dad, and why aren't you answering the phone? It's late and I've been trying all week and I had to drive 150 miles here to find out what's going on." "I'm so sorry, Patty. I didn't want to talk to your mother, so I turned off the phone. I heard from your Aunt Mary that she told you what she did." "Yeah, and I'm really mad at you for kicking her out just because of a joke. Can't you forgive her and let her come home? When she called me to tell me what she had done, she was not herself. Patty, it was more than just a joke, and I already warned her that I didn't like the way she and our friend Roger were acting, but she didn't listen. I wasn't able to get much out of my mom over the phone, but I know it was just a joke. What's so bad about that?" I wondered how much Flo told her, but I continued to tell her what happened from my point of view. I started by telling her about the neck incident they had earlier and our discussions after that. I then told her about their so-called damn joke and rolled up my sleeves and took off my bandages to show her my wrists. "Oh, Daddy, this is terrible. Was that when you kicked her out?" "Yes, I was sure they had sex. Either that or they are very good actors. I understand that they did it, and this is my reality until it proves otherwise. Your mother suggested taking a lie detector test and suggesting that Roger take it. If the test results are true, I will have to believe her, but she hurt me so much. They thought they would laugh at me and accepted that I was a pseudo-weakling, a cuckold because of their so-called joke. I am still worried that I may not be able to live with her anymore. I'm so sorry, Daddy. I hope you and Mom can get through this because I love you both despite what she did. I'm trying to achieve this because I miss your mother so much, but I still can't get over her disrespect for me. Okay, Daddy, I guess I can't ask for more than for you to try and get back to her. Now that I know what happened, I'll go visit my mom and see if I can calm her down. Please turn on your phones so I can contact you, and I know Eric wants to talk to you too. I'll call him and let him know what we're talking about. He's at work upstate and trying to contact you after his mom called him." "Okay, baby, I'll answer the phone now. Give me a hug." I took her in my arms and pressed her to me. She was so much like her mother that it was scary sometimes, and I loved her very much. She has always been my child. "Goodbye, Daddy," she told me as she walked out to her car. I waved to her as she pulled out of the driveway and headed up the street. Then I returned to my lonely drink and thought about this new direction. In the end, I decided that I would wait for the results of the lie detector test before making a decision. I suppose I couldn't trust testing one of the pranksters to verify his story, but I didn't think there was any way for both to fool the machine. Mary called me early the next morning and told me that Flo had agreed to my terms for taking a lie detector test and had gotten Roger to agree to her as well. Roger agreed to pay for both tests to show his remorse for telling Flo the joke. Mary also provided me with the name and phone number of the testing administrator. My anger at Flo for being part of the joke had cooled somewhat, but I felt so depressed. I was slowly coming to the conclusion that perhaps her love for me was gone, despite her protests about wanting to get back together with me. I was scared when I thought that it might come down to a simple decision whether I wanted a loveless marriage if the tests confirmed there was no sex. Flo tried to call me a few more times, but I just hung up when I heard her voice, and soon she received the message. I grew weaker every time I heard her talk. After that, all her communication with me was through her sister, and I received calls from her every day, mostly about how sorry Flo was and wanted to go home. but I kept telling them I wouldn't make a decision until I took a lie detector test. Around this time, our son Eric called me and begged me to forgive his mother and let her come home again. I tried to explain what happened and why his mother's actions made me feel so bad, but he couldn't understand my pain and continued to insist that I let her come home. I understood that I could end up in an estranged relationship with my son if it turned out that we were divorced. It was some comfort to know that our daughter Patty had a better understanding of what I was going through and was very supportive. After getting information from Mary about the name of the test administrator, I called friends in legal and police affairs and learned that this guy was often used by the police, and I was assured that he would conduct an impartial test. I called and made an appointment with him the next day. I learned that he had already been contacted by Flo and Roger, and that he was scheduled to take the test for each of them in 2 days. They both listed my name as an interested party with authority to control the questions that would be asked. The next day, I explained to my boss that I needed more personal time and went to the testing administrator's office. His name was Jack Harlan, and I explained to him what the problem was, and I needed to complete his testing to determine if Flo and Roger were having sex or not. We discussed the questions he would ask, and he told me that he would ask both Flo and Roger the same questions, compare the answers he got from both of them, and then give me a final written report. He agreed that if they both took the test and compared the results, it would ensure that there would be no sex if the test results for both matched. If this had not been the case, the tests would have been invalid, and I would probably never have trusted her again, and divorce would have been inevitable. If the tests showed that they were both lying, I could start divorce proceedings immediately. It wasn't difficult for me. I returned to work feeling more confident that I would soon get to the bottom of it and see if I could find out if sex had taken place. However, deep down I knew that difficult decisions awaited me. For the next 3 days, I went to work as usual and stayed late so that I could finish my work and not go home to an empty house. I had lunch at a nearby diner, and when I returned home, I drank whiskey and lay down in my cold, empty bed. Sleeping was difficult, and I really missed Flo and the warmth and love she brought to our marriage before the jokes started. Jack Harlan called me on Friday and said he would mail the test results in the morning, and I would probably receive them the next day. He didn't tell me the results, he just said I should be happy. I thought to myself that he could tell me all the results over the phone. Now I had to wait. The next day, the courier delivered the envelope with the reports, and with mixed feelings, I sat down at the kitchen table and opened it. The envelope contained a summary of Flo and Roger's ordeal. The report found that the results of both tests were consistent with the handcuffs episode because sex did not occur. Additionally, a question I asked the testing administrator about whether they had ever had sex resulted in negative results. I breathed a sigh of relief, but then I thought, what if I've already gone too far with her? I think it's time to sit down and talk to her to see where we're going. Considering it was just a tasteless joke, my payback was more than I could have hoped for, and I knew they would never forget what they did. But now I also had the proof I needed to allay my fears regarding Flo's infidelity. I wanted my old life back, but I wanted to maintain my self-respect. If things went badly now, I would never forgive myself. Early that evening, I called Mary and asked to speak to Flo. "Well, it's time," Mary answered. "I just received a copy of the test results today and Flo, and I need to talk." "Were they okay?" "Yes, they were fine. I think it was just a bad, tasteless, and indifferent joke." "Well, now Flo can't go home. We need to talk first. The disrespect she showed me by making a joke was too much. We need to talk about our future together. Mary, you remember, I didn't make any promises." My demons were unleashed again. Oh God, I was hoping that once you were sure they weren't lying, it would all be over and she could go home. I heard Flo gasping in the background as she heard Mary say what she did. I wish it were that simple, Mary, but I have a real problem with this so-called joke that goes beyond the loud laugh they got from it. So can we use your house to meet tomorrow? Yes, of course, without problems. I will leave at any time you appoint, and you can keep the house for yourself. Thank you, Mary. Can you give it to me now? Sure, just a minute. I heard some mumbling in the background, and then Flo answered the phone. Jim, darling, is that you? Yes, it's me, Flo. We need to talk. Mary says the test results were fine. Can I come home so we can talk? No, you can't go home yet, Flo. I want to meet you tomorrow afternoon at Mary's. Is it possible at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? I heard a sob and then a faint answer. Everything is okay, dear. I love you. We'll discuss this tomorrow, Flo. See you then. Bye. I realized that I miss her very much. When I hung up the phone, I heard her crying and I felt bad. I knew I needed to be persistent on this issue and see how the negotiations went the next day. Tomorrow was Sunday, and I was hoping to solve my family problems at our meeting. I knew that in the morning at church, she would be asked more questions, and people would know that we were now separated. The next day, at exactly 14, and I was at Mary's house. I found that I could no longer wait at home and left to meet Flo earlier than I should have, so I waited around the corner until the appointed time. Mary saw me as she drove by, and I think she realized how much I loved her sister. Flo opened the door as I walked up the steps and realized she was watching and waiting for me. She looked tired and sad, with dark circles under her eyes, and she had lost weight in the 2 weeks since I last saw her. It looked like she was going to hug me. I wanted to hug her too, but I just shook my head as I entered the house. I knew that if she kept me, I would take her back without properly solving our problem. Hello, Bunny. She spoke quietly. Mary went to the mall for a couple of hours so we could talk. Where do you want to sit? I made coffee. Can I get you some? I think we can sit at the kitchen table, and yes, a cup of coffee is okay. I followed her into the kitchen and sat down, watching her bring the coffee. When she placed the cups on the table and I took a sip, she sat down opposite me. Before we start, I would like to say something. She said, I have had a lot of time over the past 2 weeks to think about what happened, what led up to it, and I am shocked and ashamed of myself for my lack of respect for you as my husband, friend, and lover. I don't know why I took part in these terrible jokes with Roger. When we made you the butt of these jokes, I must have gone crazy, and I want you to know that I started seeing a psychologist to find out how I came to this way of thinking. I also want you to know that these 2 weeks of being apart and not being able to communicate with you were the worst time of my life. It made me realize how much I love you and need you. However, if you decide we and have to separate, then I will accept this as punishment for what I did to you and our marriage. I will always love you, no matter what happens. I can only ask you, as my husband, please forgive me and take me as your wife. I will make sure you never regret it. I sat and listened to her speak and heard her say what I knew I needed to hear if there was to be a successful reconciliation between us. I knew in my heart as soon as I sat down with her that I would take her back despite what she said. She went straight to the root of the problem and looked at her shortcomings that allowed this to happen and what she did to figure out why it happened. Then I remembered why I married her so many years ago. She was straightforward and didn't beat around the bush when a problem arose and needed to be resolved. Now it was my turn to say something. I remember Flo. I said, and she looked at me warily. I remember why I married you. You completed me. You made me whole, and I never want to forget that. She smiled now as I continued. Somehow we lost our way, but I think we're back together. I don't want the submissive slave back. I want the woman I married back, and I want to bring her home where she belongs so I can feel whole again. She got up from her chair and walked towards me from the table with her arms outstretched and a beautiful smile on her face. I stood up to meet her, and we merged in a frantic embrace. We kissed. I brought my truck in case I decide to take you home. How long will it take you to get ready to leave? If you pull your truck into the garage, you'll find all my gear sitting in bags waiting to be loaded. I pulled away from her a little and looked at her tear-stained face before speaking. You were quite confident in yourself, weren't you? No, I'm just hoping and praying like I've never prayed before. I didn't want to waste time getting home if you decided to leave me. I need so much time to make amends to you. She smiled and looked into my eyes as she said this and was still clinging to me. I love you. I know, and I love you more than life itself. Go home. We came back together and made a new, stronger commitment to our marriage. I could not forgive Roger for what he did to me, and to solve my problem, we sold the house in which our children grew up and bought a new, smaller house to suit our new lifestyle. Life is good. Unfortunately, the physical scars on my wrists remained for the rest of my life, and every time I stopped and looked at them, I was reminded of the emotional pain I felt when they subjected me to such a cruel joke. But it also reminded me of my love for my wife and how strong she was now. I knew that it actually made our connection and our love for each other stronger. I often noticed Flo looking at the scars too, and her eyes always became misty. Perhaps she remembered how much she loved me and what her life was like without me during those 2 weeks of hell and the pain it caused. Oddly enough, we always had great sex at night after she saw them, and I thought she was still trying to make it up to me. I made sure she saw them often. Alice and I are still good friends and see her regularly, but I never took her up on her offer. She always reminds me that she still has to pay Roger back for what he did, and that she gave me a pass for life. Oh, before I forget, Alice told us that Roger doesn't play pranks on people anymore. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.